This is a daily writing exercise recorded, day 35, titled Hallow Egg. There was nothing special about most of the eggs. Hundreds of thousands were laid each year by hundreds of thousands of dragons, who had done so for centuries until the age of dragons slowly crept to an end. Most people were not aware it was ending. For most, there used to be a lot of dragons in their youth, and now they all but few had disappeared. Killed for the most part, and eaten by some cultures, their horns and scales used in all sorts of medicine, whose effect was never truly proven. Grandpa Trent often boasted about having a dragon of his own. "It was given to me by my father," he would say. "Gave it to me on my 6th birthday. I don't know what sort exactly, but I knew it was blue, or bluish. I used to have pictures of it, you know." His surviving family barely believed him, but entertained the old man by asking him leading questions and pretending to be excited by the answers. By the time that Grandpa Trent's grandson, Louise, had children of his own, the number of dragons could practically be counted on one hand. The conversation on them had changed as well. At first there was the usual campaign to save them. Then came the numerous sanctuaries in which they were supposedly protected. Most were shut down when it became clear that the dragons in them simply could not thrive in captivity. Any breeding program set up failed to reach any meaningful results. Fines and punishments were levied against thieves and poachers, but the rarity in dragons and the rising prices for them only spurred more and more desperate souls on to kill them. And in the end, all remaining dragons were placed on a protective list. But little did it help. What was more problematic, though, was that over the centuries, no one had ever come close to understanding just how or why dragons were born. What was known was that dragon itself could decide whether an egg contained or did not contain a dragon, and that it, under normal circumstances, only ever did so rarely. But humanity never came to understand why it sometimes did and sometimes didn't fertilize the egg, even under the exact same circumstances. The leading theory at the time was that each dragon had a personality of their own, and that the whole procreational aspect was merely a roll of the dice of sorts, and that they didn't really seek to procreate deliberately. That it just happened, and that it was just a matter of chance, which thus could not be predicted or replicated accurately enough. And besides, this used to be not an issue when there were hundreds, if not thousands of them, roaming around the planet. But now it was all a bit different, and long after the last dragon had died, the people finally began to speak of the Age of Dragons, and reminisced on days gone by and who was to blame for it all. The blame game increased exponentially when it became clear that the dragon's natural source of food suddenly had no natural predator to control its population anymore. The Vadirans were goat-sized carnivorous creatures, who amongst others were part of the dragon's favorite diet. They did not breed frequently, but when they did so in the hundreds. There normally was enough time in between one set of Vadirs being born and grown up, and the previous generation having been eaten by dragons. But with the lack of dragons, that was no longer the case. Thousands of them started to spread across the known world, and it took most people far too long to realize just how much of a pest they really were. They spread like locusts across the face of the world and devoured everything containing meat in their path. The people did not know what to do, but neither did the Vadiras. There was only so much meat going around that they quickly learned to turn onto each other for survival. The world tried to fight back, but they simply could not win against the numbers. And so it lost and was forced to hide itself away behind iron and stone walls, waiting and hoping that maybe there were still dragons out there somewhere to save them. The Vadiras in the meantime changed as well. They learned to survive on less meat and learned to have the stronger eat their weak. And over the decades they became a formidable force. It was within that mangled mess of humanity that dragon eggs were found, and that hope was restored to humanity. The eggs were found deep inside an unknown cave by a group of children who had strayed off, daring each other to get closer and closer to where Vadaris' breeding ground. Inside the cave they found hundreds, if not thousands, of dragon eggs, all sprawled across a floor in an endless system of caves. No one knew who had put them there, or how old the eggs were, or if there were actually any dragons in them. The discovery, though, sparked a heated debate, and wars were eventually fought over them. No one knew if a dragon was actually going to be spawned through them, but everyone knew that they wanted to be the ones to be in control of them when the time came. The wars lasted many a year, whilst most of the dragon eggs remained in the caverns. Empires came and went in the span of a few years, and the Fadiras feasted upon their remains. When finally a sort of truce was called, most of humanity had already fallen. The survivors agreed on sharing the dragon eggs by setting up a joint committee to oversee them. The committee took its time to be formed, and only many years later could actually begin examining the eggs and separating the ones that had or did not have a dragon inside of them. The fears of many were realized when the committee returned to announce, after spending months investigating each dragon egg, that up till that point they had not yet found a single egg containing a dragon inside. The truth was suppressed and propaganda was spread. Humanity was asked for its patience and was prepared for the inevitable disappointment. The committee returned 2 years later, having gone through every single egg in every single cave, and unfortunately had to report that it had not found a single dragon egg containing a dragon. That secret was not kept for very long. Governments were toppled and violence reigned in the streets as hopelessness gripped the hearts and minds of humanity. And, in the end, there was little to no humanity left. All that remained were the Fadiras, who in time became the dragons of their age, and whose existence and eventual disappearance was soon to be missed and fought over as well. No more has been written or recorded. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.